George! George! Look, our costumes for the ball have come.
Oh, goody. Let's take a look at them.
Oh, aren't they lovely?
Oh, they're pretty colors, all right. Say, there's not much to this one. Lots of ornaments, though. That mine?
No, stupid, that's mine. I'm going as Cleopatra.
My, isn't that nice? Well, what'll I do with this thing?
Put it on.
Was this supposed to be my costume?
Mm-hmm.
Well, how'll I get it on?
Oh, you just put your head in here.
Well, where's the rest of it? Where are the trousers?
There aren't any.
Well, I'm certainly not going to appear in public in a sheet. Of all the sissy-looking things. Take it back.
George, it's not sissy. You're going as Mark Antony, and that's a toga.
Well, I don't like togas.
Oh, all the men wore them then. The only time they didn't wear them was in battle.
Well, let's us be going into battle, then.
George, you stop being stuffy. You're going to go?
All right, dear. Put down the umbrella. I'll go.
Oh, me, oh, my. Plainly the war clouds are gathering. It looks as though it would take a full-scale battle to get George to don some peacetime raiment. Perhaps we stopped eavesdropping on George and the little woman too soon. She, at least, seemed well versed in the wearing apparel of ancient Egypt. But no, I hazard the guess that Emerson Markham, our science reporter, is better versed in the wars of northern Africa. I have reason to believe that such is the case, and knowing of old, I suspect that larger dividends in learning will come through following wherever he may lead us on this excursion in science.
Why, thank you, Bob Stone, and how do you do, everyone? We have recently become more and more aware that the war has made the cold facts of history and geography into vivid human documents.
Well, some of us consider that an improvement. I seem to recall that history was only a lot of dates to remember. But getting back to our subject, Emerson, how long have you been an authority on things North African?
As an authority in that respect, I shine only by virtue of reflected glory, Bob. The real authority for this excursion is Dr. George C. Valiant, director of the University Museum at the University of Pennsylvania. Dr. Valiant very kindly supplied some facts on which to base a discussion of North Africa.
Then what are we waiting for? Let us begin our verbal invasion at once. Where does our tale begin, Emerson?
Right in the present, Bob. The United Armies in North Africa have written another chapter in the violent history of the southern coast of the Mediterranean, where great nations have time and again been locked in titanic struggles for world mastery.
Well, from the way you speak, this is merely a case of history repeating itself.
Well, Egypt, Carthage, Rome, and the Mohammedans have in turn held the shores for which the United States and the Axis recently contended. We can only surmise the conflicts between the tribes prior to that time, tribes who were probably ancestral to the modern Berber tribes. The implements of daily life, as recovered by excavation, showed the struggles in that hard climb that humans everywhere must make before they can reap the advantages of civilization.
Do specific cases figure in your delightful generalization?
Let us hope so. Egypt was the first country to break through the silence of prehistory. Her civilization endured for thousands of years, but her wars, her trade, her contacts were with Asia Minor and with the headwaters of the Nile. For 3,000 years, she could not break through the desert rampart of Libya that protected her from the wild tribes of the lands to the west that now are called Tripoli, Tunisia, Algeria, and Morocco.
But Egypt was a boss in her own corner, I take it.
Quite so. But on the coast of Palestine, there developed the civilization of the Phoenicians. These people were gifted colonizers and traders. They opened up the sea routes of the whole Mediterranean, founding colonies on both the northern and the southern shores. Their shipborne colonists achieved what Egypt could never achieve, and rich settlements grew up along the coast of Africa. In the interior of the country, however, there still persisted native population and native cultures. One of these Phoenician colonies, Carthage, grew into the queen of the southern Mediterranean.
By virtue of what, may I ask?
Well, because it maintained its independence, while Greek armies conquered Egypt and settled Libya, and while Greek colonies spread out along the northern shores of the ocean.
Sort of a fifth column infiltration, perhaps.
Possibly. Anyway, when Greece fell, as fall she did, and the power of Rome grew, a struggle for the mastery of the Mediterranean ensued. Whoever held the Mediterranean controlled the civilized world, you see.
The contestants being Rome and Carthage?
Correct. They locked horns in a desperate struggle for centuries. The fortunes of war veered between one and the other. In one of the most remarkable feats of campaign and supply, the great Hannibal led his tribes through Spain across the Pyrenees and the Alps, to threaten the capital of Rome itself.
Oh, I remember Hannibal, a gent with the elephants.
Yes. We talked today of the difficulty of supplying tanks and automotive equipment with fuel oil across the great breaches of the sea and the land. Hannibal had an equivalent difficulty in supplying his war elephants with provender in the long trek to the north. Well, superior Roman sea power finally led to the downfall of Carthage. The Roman talent for politics and war enlisted the rise in Morocco. Carthage fell and Phoenician power was broken.
Well, what happened then? Did things go to rack and ruin?
No, civilization did not die in North Africa. In fact, the administrative talents of Rome built new cities and created in Tunisia and Algeria the granary of Rome. In the pleasing climate of these provincial cities, scholars came from the Greek settlements to the east, and historians and literary men found abundant opportunity for expression.
From which I judge everything was calm and peaceful.
Yes, it was. There were several centuries of peace. And then the northern hordes began to sweep down on Rome and its dominions. Vandals swept relentlessly through Spain, from there to Africa, and for a while Carthage was dominated from the north.
For a while, you say. Who put an end to it?
The remnants of Rome under Belisarius. Yes, the Byzantine Empire finally reconquered their ancient territory, and a twilight of civilization existed for a time.
Well, then what happened?
In the 7th century, conquest and war visited North Africa once more.
And who might have been these disturbers of the peace?
The Mohammedan hordes, Bob, warriors and missionaries together, swept in from the east.
War makes strange bedfellows, doesn't it? How far did they get?
They relentlessly overran the coastal territory, penetrated deep into the interior, and sweeping north through Spain, at one time threatened the whole of Christian Europe. However, the lack of talent for empire administration weakened the Muslim world. Independent kingdoms were set up throughout North Africa. A running war ensued between the small independent Muslim states in North Africa and the small independent European states across the sea.
And what was the bone of contention, Emerson?
Oh, the dominion of the great Mediterranean highway, Bob. In an effort to recapture Tunis, the great French crusader king, Louis XI, lost his life. Freebooters and pirates, sailing out of North African ports, preyed on the rich shipping of the Christian lands.
A lively place to live, wasn't it? Never a dull moment for the doughboys of that ancient day.
No, it certainly seems not. And then came the reconquest of Muslim Spain under Ferdinand and Isabella, bringing with it the hope of reestablishing another Christian empire. In the early 16th century, the first American interest in North Africa developed. Cortez, fresh from the conquest of Mexico, put his sword and his fortune at the service of his king in yet another siege of Tunis. The naval and military resources of the day, however, were insufficient to establish an effective control over the North African coast. European fleets occasionally would bombard North African ports. Some sort of treaty would be set up, to be honored only until the fleet withdrew.
So they had scraps of paper in those days, too.
Yes, then as now. In the early 19th century, the infant United States appeared on the North African scene when Stephen Decatur materially assisted in putting down piracy in the Tripoli area. Previously, the armies of Napoleon fought in the shadow of the pyramids in a disastrous campaign, whereby his European adversaries, his Muslim enemies, and nature all combined to bring defeat to his expeditionary forces. At the close of the Napoleonic War, France, which was very interested in the North African scene, began systematically to carve out an empire.
I should say that the place was already pretty well carved up in more ways than one.
Yes, so it was. Anyway, Algeria and East Morocco fell first. Later, Tunis became a protectorate. Morocco, the reservoir of the old and wild populations, little affected by the dominating cultural forces of the past, held out tribe by tribe. In the French campaigns to invest and quiet this territory, the deathless exploits of the Foreign Legion are written in letters of fire. The flabby fingers of the Turkish Empire were gradually pried from their grasp of this African extension of the Muslim world. Egypt retained a quasi-independence as a semi-independent European protectorate. Tripoli fell to Italy as the last plum of the African world.
Whereupon they settled down for a little peace and quiet, no doubt.
Well, you might have thought so, but they did not. Back from the coast still lay a land of independent tribesmen who would rise and revolt whenever a favorable opportunity opened.
Then do wars in North Africa never end?
They don't seem to do that. During the War of 1914-1918, the French had a secondary war in western Morocco against tribesmen there. The Senussi, instigated by the Germans and the Turks, fought Britain and Italy alike during the same period. After the war, the development of the automobile contributed greatly to the pacification of North Africa. The ancient capitals of the Phoenicians and the Romans bloomed as opulent French cities. It was an extraordinary blend of the Arab and the French worlds, yet behind the mountain ranges lay the threat of war. As late as 1923, the Spanish hold on their little sector of Morocco was seriously threatened, and it took the might of France to break the revolt of Abd el-Krim.
Which brings us down to the war for the domination of the Mediterranean between the United Nations and the Axis powers.
That's right, Bob. The prizes of Egypt, Tripoli, Tunisia, and Algeria, and the relatively unexploited land of Morocco are the same prizes for which the civilized world has fought for 3 millennia. In the background of the struggle, there still lurk the native tribes who may act for either side or for themselves. Yet the best part of North Africa is still stable and is still pursuing its orderly course.
Well, Emerson, one thing is very clear to me at this point. There are lots of things I'll want to remember in the story you've just unfolded. I'll be glad to have a copy of the paper I'm just about to offer to our friends. Ladies and gentlemen, if you would like to have a copy of a paper by Dr. G.C. Valiant of the University of Pennsylvania, which contains all the facts on North Africa mentioned here, and more besides, all you have to do is address a postcard to Excursions in Science in care of the station to which you are listening, asking for scientific paper number 90, Wars of North Africa. That's Wars of North Africa, scientific paper number 90. And now it's time once again for that portion of our program which is devoted to questions and answers. Ladies and gentlemen, the questions are your questions, or from people like ourselves, laymen of scientific curiosity. All answers reflect the best in scientific thought, for they are based on information supplied by the staff members of the General Electric Research Laboratory, or occasionally from other scientific sources equally reliable. Well, Emerson, let's start with this one. This young lady writes, how can a drop of water pass through a bubble without breaking the bubble? She says she has seen water pass, or apparently pass, through bubbles hanging from a faucet many times.
It really only appears to pass through, Bob. The water coming from the faucet follows around the outside of the bubble and drops from its center. Thus it looks as if the water is actually passing through the bubble.
Another question from the same correspondent, Emerson. If everything is composed of molecules, why can't we see the individual molecules?
Well, when looking at a house made of bricks from a distance, our eyes cannot distinguish the individual bricks. And in general, it is the same way with molecules. Our eyes lack the resolving power to pick out each separate molecule. Molecules are so minute, and each one so close to its neighbor, that they do not have any individuality to our eye.
Could an individual molecule be seen with the electron microscope, Emerson?
Only the very largest of the molecules, that is, those having a molecular weight up in the millions, can be observed with it, Bob.
A young man in Pittsfield, Massachusetts, has a couple of questions. His first inquiry, do you think that the bodies of automobiles will be made in one piece in 1950?
Well, no, we don't. Because, for one thing, it doesn't seem as easy to assemble a car if the body of it were but one piece. Very large molds would be required, too, to accomplish such a body.
Our friend has another question for us. Could a dent in a plastic car be fixed with a hot iron without ruining the finish?
If the car happened to be made of plastic of the thermoplastic type, that is, of the type that may undergo softening when heated and hardening when cooled again and again, then the area where the damage occurred could probably be warmed and caused to flow, and with buffing and polishing, the finish would be as good as ever.
This young man certainly has an eye on the future. He next asks, are the engines in 1950 likely to be made of aluminum?
The chief parts of the motor, as far as weight is concerned, are the pistons and the block. Aluminum alloys were being used for the pistons before our present conflict and will probably be used afterwards. It doesn't seem improbable that alloys of aluminum may also be used for the block part of the motor, too, sometime in the future.
Here's a communication from a housewife. She says, we are going to make a playroom in our basement but want to leave the floor as it is for the present. Is there any way we can dust-proof the cement floor?
We'd suggest that you try coating it with water glass, 4 or 5 parts by volume of water to 1 part by volume of water glass or sodium silicate. Brush it on thoroughly with a broom and let dry. This will not serve as a permanent coating, however, but can be done over from time to time as it wears off.
Is there any way she can waterproof the floor so that it can be painted, the lady next asked?
Well, the water glass has a tendency to resist water and can be painted with a waterproof paint after it has been allowed to dry for about 2 weeks. I might add, Bob, that these suggestions, of course, will not produce the cure, but an approximation of it.
How about a cure for this next case? How can I remove soot from my fireplace chimney and fire bricks? Is there some chemical I can safely use?
We'd advise the use of sal ammoniac, which in the terms of the chemist is simply ammonium chloride. The salt is just thrown onto the burning coal or wood and will carry on from there by itself.
And if you'll excuse me for being so brash, I'll carry on from here by myself, just long enough to say, thank you, Emerson Markham, and goodbye, everyone, until our next excursion in science.